Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of the Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, good morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Shu.
Monday morning, right? And Sunday nights here in the States. And good evening to everybody in the States. How are you doing?
Good. I hear that your city gained a princess over the weekend.
Oh, yeah, I know. And that's all my mother-in-law and my wife has been talking about. Like, okay, which apartment he rented it and blah, 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 blah. And it's so funny that we already know exactly where they live.
All my wife and her friends, every conversation just boils down to, I hear the word like Kumura come up. I'm like, oh, they're talking about the princess moving to the U.S.
Well, we know exactly which office he works at. So we actually, my wife and son even went to the front of the office building like 3 weeks ago, even took photos and everything. And my son did the Koya pose by Nobu Takada.
Perfect. Yeah, my wife was talking about that. She said, how did he get this job? And part of me is just thinking like, this is a genius move by that law firm.
Oh, yeah.
Because so many people are going to want to have him as their lawyer, their Japanese businesses.
Sure.
Because then they can have a dinner and then they can make the princess come to the dinner or something.
Exactly. But the problem is he failed the bar exam. So he's going to have to try it again. So we'll see, right?
Not to get too far into it, but I made my wife happy because I told her that the most bar exams, I looked up in New York, is true.
Mm-hmm.
You have a higher chance of passing if it's your first time.
Yeah.
And like once it's your second time, your percentage of passing drops to like 30%.
Really?
So he's going to have it looks like if he fails again, he's never going to pass it, essentially.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Are you allowed to take bar exam as much as you want? Can you take like 20 times?
You can. But it's one of those things where they only administer the test a couple times a year.
Mm.
And so it becomes like a very time invasive because I think they only take it twice a year. So 20 times is 10 years. But I heard most firms will usually give you about 2 chances to pass it before they fire you.
That's what I thought, right. And if you do not pass twice or 3 times, you're gone pretty much, right?
Yeah, but he seems to be a special case.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he has a very PR, right? And purposes there too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm pretty sure he has a connection with the high end of Japan.
Well, right? I mean, how the hell did this guy that went to a law school no one's heard of all of a sudden get hired by a prestigious law firm in New York City? It's like, maybe he's dating the princess of Japan.
Exactly. And it's not like he went to Ivy League or like a real top law school too. So, you know. Yeah. But anyway, let's get into Japanese MMA. And let's talk about this one first. Mikuru Asakura to UFC. Yes. Apparently on his YouTube channel, him and his fellow teammate Rikuto Shirakawa had some conversation about like a possible featherweight Grand Prix next year. And Mikuru says that, well, if I'm going to fight a featherweight Grand Prix, you know, it's going to be a contract restrictions. I probably can't get out of it for next year also. So then I prefer going to the UFC. Now, the big controversy is that Mikuru said, I'm going to UFC not because I'm a tough fighter or I beat somebody or I'm a champion. None of that. He said, I have 2 million subscribers on YouTube. So that should be good enough to get into UFC. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, he's not wrong. The UFC has shown that if you're a draw, they'll bring you in.
Mm-hmm.
And they've brought underqualified people in before. I mean,
right.
Maybe the biggest example of all time is CM Punk.
Oh, yeah, of course, right.
Or even to some degree, even though he had a good wrestling career, amateur wrestling career, is Brock Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
So the UFC is willing to bring you in if you can bring eyes.
Right.
My problem is the UFC doesn't seem to be really focusing on Japan at the moment.
No, not much.
And it's with COVID as well, with the restrictions and everything. I mean, I know the numbers are getting better, but the idea of them doing a Japan show probably isn't in the near future.
No, I don't think so. Right. I think Shanghai comes first, right? Because of UFC.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that negatively affects his ability to leverage the YouTube views.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's just one of those things where his division in the UFC is so competitive.
That's my point too. I mean, who he's going to fight? He could be the bottom of the barrel and it still could lose, right?
Right. And I don't see that him being on it helps the UFC. I see it helps him more than
Right.
it helps the UFC.
Exactly. That's my point too. Because from dealing with the UFC in the past 20 years or so, UFC always go for that sure things.
Right.
So if you say, "Oh, I'm gonna approach you and says like I have 2 million subscribers. If you book me, you might make this much money on pay-per-view." That kind of a talk doesn't work. I think he needs to bring a more solid deal with him.
Right.
Meaning, if he could convince Fuji Television or Abema TV to cough up like a couple $1 million for license fees, whatever that is, that's a much better approach, business approach, I think, you know?
Right, because the UFC is kind of taking like this back burner approach in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
where there are people that like the UFC in Japan, but I would consider them to be diehard MMA fans.
Right.
And the UFC doesn't even sell pay-per-views in Japan. I think you get access to all the pay-per-views if you just order Fight Pass in Japan.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a great deal. It's like a $29 and you get to watch everything, right? Pretty much.
Right, exactly. You get
Yeah.
to watch everything. So the people that really like the UFC are already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he was fighting for the UFC, those numbers would go up.
Right.
But is it a number that the UFC cares about? Is the big
Exactly.
issue.
That's my point because she's not going to score Zhang Weili numbers she did in China.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's a huge, big difference, right? Between that. So,
Right.
and
I
also,
think he's ideally situated. I mean, I don't want to like sound like I'm obsessed with Rising or anything, but I think he's ideally situated for Rising.
oh, yeah, of course.
And
I mean,
I think these landmark cards.
right.
And if I was him, instead of going to the UFC, I would make my own events.
Yeah, or even go to Bellator for like one fight deal just to get an okay opponent, right? Because they probably would be willing to do that, right, for the show.
He's shown now that people are willing to buy a 4-fight card if he is on it,
Right.
and he knows enough people to put 4 fights on a card. And if he regularly sells 80,000 pay-per-views, that's a couple $1 million for him an event.
Right. I mean, and he has to be able to find a good opponent that sells too, but still, it won't be so hard, right? For at least a couple of events, you know?
Yeah, he could just go the whole YouTuber angle and start some beef with one of his guys from his YouTube channel, and they could have a fight. I mean, I don't think people care that much about how tough his opponent is.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I'm telling this from a manager's point of view too, because way in the back in the past that me and Sean Shelby had a conversation about trying to putting Imanari into UFC. And Sean was interested in it, but one of the major concerns he had was that Imanari was already past peak, right? It's not like he was having a big winning streaks and stuff like that. But if he brings Imanari in, one of the Sean's concern was like, I'm gonna have to explain that to all the other management when they complain. You know what I mean? Like all the managements will say like, well, why are you putting him in instead of my guys, right? So I think that will happen if you put Mikuru in there too, because he never won the title. He's lost to Clayton. He lost to Saito. So again, the manager like me will be calling Sean, so like, well, what the heck? You know, I got this guy much better. You know.
Now let's think about this. Is this more of a leveraging thing for him to get Rising to pay him more money?
Maybe. I think so. Or the fact that I don't know. I think it seems like he makes so much YouTube videos, right? Like almost every day. He's running out of idea. Maybe he needs to stir things up. You know?
I'm just I know that he has to have some special YouTube deal because it has high views, but from what I've researched, it's not enough to warrant him buying a Ferrari driving to pick up his mom.
He's got to be another deal. And also he has another deal. I mean, with the real estate company, obviously he's like a sponsor of making this new Mikuru design home, you know, and he has that deal with pachinko, company, whatever. So he's making big sponsorship money. And I will tell this on the record because I do sales for Naoki, and stuff like that. The top fighters in Rising sponsorship money is far better than you could get in North America.
Yeah,
you'd be surprised. I could never reveal the amounts and stuff like that, but it's not even comparison to what the fighter makes from Venom or Reebok or Monster Energy or any of that. Actually, yeah.
Do you think that's because UFC famously had the sponsorship tax before they started doing exclusive sponsors? Do you think they kind of killed the sponsorship market in North America?
Because biggest exposure is in the octagon, right? If you're paying for exposure as a sponsor, where you only advertise your product, it's in the octagon. If you can't do that, and you're limited, right? I mean, sure, if you're a champion, if you have big followers on SNS, sure, but that's still limited, right? Compared to the big pay-per-view shows, which should be run by ESPN or news or I mean, media outlet, all the exposure in combined, it's not even comparison, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why Rising sponsorship is doing very well because it's on Fuji Television. As you know,
Right.
in Japan, it's a very limited number of terrestrial broadcasting channels, right? So
Right. Plus, I mean, the more you think about it, I know that Mikuru. Another idea I have is that Mikuru's sponsor, like his main sponsor,
mhm,
Horie,
yeah,
is kind of obsessed with creating Japan's first UFC champion.
right.
And I think in the past, Kai has also like piped up about wanting to go to the UFC,
Hmm.
and now Mikuru is saying that. So I wonder if like that's him whispering in their ear.
Maybe. I mean, the point is
But
this. Remember, Mikuru even said that he doesn't believe there's no big difference between him and Max Holloway, which I don't believe at all. But they have said such a things. I think so.
yeah.
They're maybe in a way smart that they're using UFC as their business, tools.
If they're using it to leverage Rising for more money, that's a smart
Mhm.
move because
It is.
Rising's in a position where Ham Sohee left, which wasn't that embarrassing because it's not as high
Mhm.
profile as a division.
Hmm.
But then other people started to leave too.
Right.
And now they can't just have all their popular fighters leaving. And
I mean, point
so
is
they'll
like
probably make some money to stay.
besides Tenshin or maybe
Mhm.
Rena or Kanna who just lost, it
Mhm.
really the Asakura Brothers is the only biggest draw, right? I mean, the sure draw,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe Naoki if he wins or that kind of stuff. But it's not sure thing yet. So
Well,
to
the
me, it's
important thing
almost like Mikuru is like sitting. He's like big shareholders of a Rising board meeting, right? I mean, he has strong things to say. I think.
Well, that's one of the reasons, if I was him, that I would think that this is a play because he's never going to have the type of leverage over the UFC that he does over Ryzen
No, never.
or the negotiating power.
Right. Never. I mean, being famous in Japan is a big difference from being famous in world stage. I
Plus, they're going
mean,
to say, "Oh, I'm famous on YouTube," but the UFC's always had a thing with people that don't speak English,
right.
and they're going to be like, "Well, those YouTube videos are only going to be big in the Japanese market,
Exactly.
which we don't really care about at the moment." At the moment, I
Sure. And
mean,
also, when you really think about so-called YouTubers, even in states too, like Logan Paul and everybody else, they're famous on YouTube planet, but it's
yeah.
not like they're so famous on everyday like household name, right? But they
Well, I was
became a
actually
household name because they started fighting with a famous
right.
fighter.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I'm actually working on an article about Rena.
Mm-hmm.
And her social media presence isn't as big as Kana Asakura's, but that's probably just because she doesn't concentrate on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look over their careers, Rena's the general public knows who Rena is.
Oh yeah, but not Kanna. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Rena.
So the Japanese conscious is very aware of who she is, but that's not reflected on social media numbers. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think Japanese people have always kind of had like a hesitancy to get on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even back in like the Mixie days where they would make fake names and use
Right,
fake
right, right,
profile
right.
pictures. So it's kind of interesting you brought that up because it is true that just being big on social media, at least in Japan, doesn't mean that the general Japanese public knows who you are.
No, because you have to understand, like majority of general public still watches television, right? And
Mhm.
especially in Japan, where the elderlies are like have 50% of like populations.
Yeah,
So all these people who's old, who doesn't really, doesn't know how to operate iPhones or iPad, they don't watch, YouTube. So that's a huge difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I like to go out to ramen and eat at restaurants and things like that, and they usually have like a TV up, and
Hmm.
I feel like that's where most people get all their information. They sit down, they eat some food, and they watch what's on the TV.
Right.
They aren't
Exactly.
out looking on the internet. They aren't at a desktop computer or
No,
something.
right. Even like a sauna everywhere, they all watch
Yeah,
television, right? Instead of like
exactly.
YouTube. So that's a big difference there. So let's get to the next subject, which you mentioned, which is Mr. Sakakibara not too happy with Pancha.
Yeah,
Tell me what
so
happened to that one. Yeah.
I'll preface this by saying before the fight, my number
Mhm.
one concern for Panchan Rena is that she has some of the elements that Rising is looking for and that
Yeah.
she's marketable.
Right.
But the problem is she doesn't have a lot of knockouts.
Yeah. Okay.
And her performances to me, they're like kind of technical, but they aren't impressive. And knowing what I know about the fight game and in Japan, they were trying to set up a squash match for her in this
Mm.
fight.
Okay.
Momoko is a former champion, but she's on a 3-fight losing streak. She's significantly shorter than Panchan,
Hmm.
and Momoko was actually dropped a couple fights ago.
Sure.
So they're
Right.
thinking, here's an opponent with a good name that Panchan can build herself off of and make a big impression in front of the Rising audience. The problem is that didn't happen. I mean,
No,
I thought it was
exactly.
an incredibly
Yeah.
close fight.
It was a close fight, but I thought the Pancha's like fight style is outboxing, right? She doesn't really
Right.
step in. So
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Then you got to think about, let's look at the past. Who has been kickboxers in Japan that are women that were popular? And the answers are Rena,
Rena,
was very
right,
popular. And what does Rena do? Rena knocks people out.
right. So is it all
And
days Hisaya Watanabe and stuff like
yeah,
that? They knock fighters out.
they all
Right,
knock people out.
right.
And
Or
I think
Megumi
that's what
Hunji who
Sakakibara was
finished it.
hoping for.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, well, I mean, it's only first time in the Rising, though. So I'm pretty sure that Sakakibara will give her another shot, right? I mean,
No, I think she's going to fight on the New Year's Eve card.
mhm.
But I think he's expressed his. I don't think he is being overly negative. I just think he's kind of saying, like, we were hoping that she'd have a more standout performance than she did about the future of the division. And I think that's going to be a problem with her because I don't see her as being a knockout artist.
No.
But so they're going to have to figure something about that out because Rise, not Rising, but Rise, the kickboxing promotion, has the same problem. And what they've done is they've introduced smaller gloves, and they've also had like knockout incentives in the past. They're trying to solve the problem of how to get knockouts because, I mean, these girls are only like, what, 46 kilos? They're absolutely tiny. So I think there's some concern about whether she has staying power if she can't get finishes. But in the meantime, my theory is that they're actually going to have her fight Hinata Terayama on New Year's Eve because it's rumored that Hinata recently turned down a fight that was scheduled in early December. Hinata's brother is fighting on the Okinawa card, who's her younger brother.
Right.
And then she's talking about that. And I mean, it'd be a good fight for Terayama because if she goes in there and beats Panchan Rena, all of a sudden nobody cares about Panchan Rena. They care about Hinata Terayama.
True. So that's like good. So it's a win-win situation for Rising, right?
Yes.
Right. But I think Sakakibara will always find a way to promote like these fighters, especially the one he likes.
Well, the thing about Panchan, she's already doing commercials. I mean, she's doing commercials for like hair removal clinics on TV and YouTube.
Right.
So she's popular. I just think that if you can't finish, it's eventually going to take away from your popularity.
Yeah, that too. And of course, the Rising contract itself, they really don't have a win bonus. They always have a finish bonus. So it's a clear message from promotion that they're looking for fighters who can finish.
Right.
Right. So but we'll see what she does next,
Yeah. So I predict New Year's Eve, though.
Oh, of course. I think they're going to have to put her on New Year's Eve.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Rise is going to do open finger gloves tournament too. So maybe that could be happening, right? So it's maybe. And they get a,
Rising kind of has the benefit that Rise is trying to solve the problem for them almost by putting the smaller gloves in and all of those things.
Exactly, right. And I mean, obviously, Rise and Rising are good friends, right? And the graphics almost has a similarity too. So
exactly,
it's probably the same designer who's doing it.
Cygames money just being thrown around.
Oh yeah, I think so. All right, so let's get to this next subject, which is the Shinya Aoki and Yamato Nishikawa on Valley to the Japan show. I guess they had some little pro wrestling like a brawl after the fight.
Yeah, thought it was great. I loved it. I've gone full circle. I rotate in whether or not I think Aoki is an asshole or whether I think he's a genius. And I'm starting to go back on the side of that he's a genius.
Yeah, he's a great pro wrestler, obviously. It's all pro wrestling move all the way, right?
Right, exactly. Because I think the issue is he wanted to fight Akiyama. But Akiyama hasn't been receptive to it.
Right.
So what's he do? He goes in there and makes this fight all about himself.
Right.
And throws the pro wrestling elbows, pushes him up against the cage. Now
he
got himself a light find up.
elbow too, so it wasn't even like serious. It's obvious.
Yeah, it's
obviously for the viewers, for the listeners who doesn't know, I guess Yamato Nishikawa won this fight, and he said he wanted to fight Aoki after this. So he called out Aoki. So he was commentating on the table, but he got up and went to the cage and gave him pro wrestling 2 elbow shots, and he basically said that not in a small independent promotion like this. Let's get to the bigger stage. That's what he was saying. So maybe they're hoping for one championship. Who knows?
Yeah, one championship, or I mean, for being a guy that's so closely associated with one championship,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Aoki shows them very little loyalty. And I think he's even talked about like fighting for Rising in the past.
Right. I mean,
And
he actually openly complained that his fights got canceled, but he found out through Twitter instead of from one championship, and that happens a lot.
Right.
And he's complained about that, and yeah, he's saying that if he can't fight this year, then he really want to go fight for the Rising New Year's Eve, which
Yeah.
that's probably not going to happen, right? So
right, exactly. But so I think he's like an enigma. I won't say that I think he's a genius or an asshole. I think he's just a very unique Japanese fighter and voice.
no, I think the moment he decided to not go to UFC and decided to go to one, like 7 years ago, I think he has set his mind to market himself in Japan as much as possible, using social networks or writing books or doing pro wrestling, that kind of stuff. So he's like, in a way, like a multi, like talented, like influencer. He tried to be, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because he writes blogs, he writes
Mhm.
articles, he does
Mhm.
his own little like solo
Notes,
podcast. He
voicey,
does all
right?
this stuff. And even if you don't like Shinya Aoki, he's put so much of himself out there that he has become like a voice of the Japanese fight game
Exactly.
community.
Right.
And it's hard to deny because he has opinions on almost everything that happens, and he seems to know what's going on in most regards.
Mm-hmm.
I just think back to like the Sakura issues where he's like, "Oh, I know exactly what happened there," and you're just like, "Oh, he seems to know about everything." Half the time, he's probably making it up. Sometimes he
Yeah.
does seem to know what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. 99% of it, he knows what he's talking about. But also, I know for the fact that he's a pro wrestler, so he kind of creates story. I wouldn't say he lies, but he creates story to make it interesting. And sometimes that kind of ticks off some people who believe, oh, that's not true, kind of thing,
Well,
but the point is,
also,
this is all pro wrestling for him,
you got to think too. Like he's been in attendance. He's seen Kitaoka get knocked out like 6 times recently. He's seen all these older fighters just get absolutely obliterated. And I think he's going about it smart. He's picking his opponents wisely, and he's just trying to make hay while the sun shines.
Right. Now, what do you think about this boy, Yamato Nishikawa, who is 18 years old, champion? But the way he fights is very interesting because he likes to finish people off his back, right? He knocked out Kawana with the pound from his back.
I think that's a dangerous strategy.
I think so too, yeah.
I mean, the amount of times you've seen someone beat someone with strikes off their back. What, Bas Rutten versus Kevin Randleman? Is that the only example that comes to mind?
Right. That's the only one I can think of, right? Well, let me tell you this interesting story about him. I personally think he's too small for lightweight. I think he's more suitable for 145. But when the listeners, when you have a chance to watch his fight, take a look at his father, who is always on his corner. His father is a very interesting, unique character who dresses pretty interestingly. Sometimes brings in like a fake Japanese katana as a corner.
Oh, really?
But here's a very interesting story. More than a few people have suggested to Nishikawa that maybe he should fight at 145. And his daddy's immediate response was this: anything below lightweight, I do not consider as a kakutogi. So he doesn't think anything below 155 is not a martial arts. You got a crazy father there. So this is
got like a little manager, like a pro wrestling valet by his side.
Right. And I heard that he even actually takes Yamato to the mountain to train, like inside the mountain, do all this Tarzan
what
stuff.
Is this? Like old school in Minoaman training. He's like running up Mount Fuji.
Right. And he brags about how huge Yamato's feet is and stuff like that, which is true. I hear his feet is big, with the Japanese. But it's the father is a very interesting figure. So for the listeners, if you really want to watch Nishikawa's fight next, maybe you can also enjoy by watching his corner.
I will definitely keep an eye out for that.
Right. But again, the Nishikawa is vocally saying that he wants to fight for one. And that actually it may be a pretty interesting, good idea for him, who I think it should be 145, but wants to stick with a lightweight, with a one's weight system. He could fight at the featherweight, right? Weighing 155. So that may be an interesting choice.
Plus, I mean, one has showed interest in the Japanese market. So he could probably get paid more, paid way more by one than he might from the UFC.
Probably depends on how you do it. But right now, I think we should get into a little bit about the one championship because Mr. Kamikubo, the one of the fighter who was under the one championship contract, has tweeted it and says complained about how he couldn't get fights for so long and then release me, what's going on, blah blah blah. So just because of that, and also other fighters who couldn't get a fight, I think most of the Japanese fighters are now reluctant to sign with one championship.
Yeah, I think one championship's always had some weird things going on, but the coronavirus seems to have affected them about more than the only promotion affected more by COVID is Road FC, which I can't even tell if they exist anymore. But one championship has been decimated by the coronavirus because Singapore is very strict with the regulations about how they can host events. And you see promotions like Deep and Pancrase are just pumping out events because they're trying to keep their fighters busy.
Right.
You know that if you don't keep the fighters busy, they're going to leave.
Right.
They're going to go somewhere else. So,
So the point is, but in one championship, because of the contract, they can't go anywhere else. That's the problem.
Exactly. Unless you're super famous, like Itsuki, who gets to have that weird Shuto / one championship fight because she was talking about how upset she was.
Right. So at least Abema is trying to create like event, right, to make them busy. But obviously Kamikubo is not getting called from there, so I think he's complaining. And I think interesting about it is like Mr. Chona has posted some blog explaining about the situations, and Kamikubo has rejected fights more than a few times. If you reject fights, your term of the contract gets extended for 6 months. So he shouldn't be complaining about that. And also, I think he participated in some jiu-jitsu fight, and that also extended his term of the contract, and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not sure about that because I deal with many, many promotions, and most of the promotions do have that clause and say if you say no to the fight, they could extend the term. But just saying no 2-3 times, they usually don't really exercise that right. And if you get a permission to compete in a grappling event, it's not like they're going to extend your term of the contract. So,
hasn't Shonen traditionally kind of always been a very positive promoting voice for one championship?
Sure, because he used to be a consultant on one championship. No longer is a consultant, but I think he feels responsible about it.
He's like the opposite of Aoki, who says whatever he wants about one championship. Shonen's there with like a broom trying to clean up the mess that people say.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? That's because Chona is like maybe old Japanese style kind of mentality. That once he's loyal to that person. So he was taken care well by Chattery, and of course created more opportunity for his fighters. So he has to protect one championship in that sense.
Right.
But we'll see. But besides this Nishikawa, there's another guy who fought in that show, Mr. Tatsuro Taira, which we have touched on him, and he said that he beat this Chilean fighter and now he still wants to go to the UFC and blah blah blah. Now, what do you think?
He did what you love. He tweeted a demand to fight for the UFC. And my one criticism of the tweet was that his Twitter account is all in Japanese.
Yeah, I know.
And then he tweeted that, and nowhere in there in English characters is his name.
Right.
So I'm just like, maybe you should put your name somewhere on your account.
Yeah.
So if the UFC does see it, they know who's tweeting at them.
Right. But I already did talk to Mick about Taira, so they're aware of who he is. But the issue right now is it's so hard for him to fight a good opponent because the past 2 opponents like Maeda, Shimizu, they were peaking 10 years ago. Yeah, and this one Chilean fighter, sure, but it's not like he's top 50 or top 100, right, in the world. So I think if he's gonna try to get to the UFC, VTJ or Shuto or Abema has to get more better fighter. Some fighter if he beats that UFC will take a notice of.
Which is going to be difficult because of the pandemic, Japanese fighters in Japan, if you have any skill at all, you've been busy. Because the promotions need you. They can't bring in any foreign talent. No. So I think it's kind of spread thin across all the promotions. If Rising's having a hard time putting together events with all solid fighters, I think a new company like VTJ is going to have a hard time.
Yeah, here's what it is. But right now, the VTJ was able to bring in a Chilean guy, right? So they have a good, solid connection with the government through Mr. Genki Sudo. However, this is the deal. We saw the report that a government started accepting the visa application for work visa and stuff like that right now. But here's the problem: it's still 10-day quarantine rules, right? If you go in there. Now, this special visa, if you get approved, that 10-day you can diminish that to 3 days, and that's what happened with this, Alfred Maya. He was only able to he quarantined for 3 days, but in order to get that visa approved, it takes so long. So actually, last week I asked this question to Rising that if Ren Hiramoto fights in New Year's Eve, can I bring in Duke Rufus as a cornerman, right? And their answer was, well, then we're gonna have to apply for his visa. Oh, like yesterday. so, so it takes a long time to get that approved. So it's not as easy as you think everybody thinks it is,
Well, I remember last week the guy had the question about why the Chilean fighter, and I remember just thinking like, well, they probably don't have a lot of options on countries that they can bring people in from,
right,
and things like that. But that negative, I think that affects him more than VTJ.
Yeah,
because I think in Japan they like the idea of like the Japanese guy beating up the foreign fighter.
Right.
They don't care where they're from. But for Taira, if he's trying to go to the UFC, they're going to be like, "What have you done recently? Who have you beaten?" And for him to do that, I mean, VTJ is going to have to start bringing in some like actual legitimate opponents, which I don't know if that's possible. Yes. Is his contract with VTJ just an extension of his Shuto contract?
I think so. I think it's VTJ's one-fight contract. And I can tell this right now officially that, there are fighters out there that's available. You'd be surprised because, it's like UFC. Of course, everybody wants to fight for UFC. But there are guys out there with this like 10-0, 9-0 record, 21 years old, same weight class, that kind of stuff. It's not that hard to find them. But the problem is most of them are like Brazilians, like Russian, tough guys. And in those countries, it's still kind of hard to get a visa approved.
Right.
Yeah, that's the issue.
And for him, do you almost rather just say you're gonna have a hard time getting the UFC's attention in Japan right now, but if you go to Bellator, win a couple of fights, next thing you know, you could be in the UFC?
Could be, but I think politically he's with Shuto, VTJ, not under Abema. So if it's outside Japan, unless if it's not UFC, then it probably would have to be one.
Oh.
But if you go one, that's a long contract, so he won't be able to go to UFC. So I think his choice is now he's gonna have to hope that Abema and VTJ or Shuto will try to grab somebody who's really good.
I have a question. So, how many of these mediocre opponents do you think you could beat enough of them for the UFC to be like, all right, we'll give you a shot?
Well, here's what it is. I mean, for example, right? Let's look at like Contender Series this year.
Yeah.
And let's look at all these flyweights who lost or won but didn't get signed.
Right.
Yeah. That kind of level of fighter, he's gonna have to beat those guys. If he can't, then he's not gonna get attention from UFC.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is something I always explain this to the Japanese fighters too. Like they always like, oh, I want to fight the UFC veteran, so that'd be a good appeal to the UFC. But there's so many UFC veterans out there, and some of the UFC veterans are on like 4-fight losing streak. So it's not like they're getting a big credibility from like a UFC matchmaker's point of view. It's much better to go and beat somebody they're looking at to sign, right? Like,
yeah. What if you get some of those guys from those contenders events that won their fights and didn't get signed, and then you smash those people?
Well, I actually do have a couple of guys in mind that I am going to present that to Shuto, Mr. Sakamoto, to consider it because yes, those are the guys I think it's very interesting. But here's the problem too, though, because if I were a Shuto promoter, I wouldn't sign those tough guys to fight Taira for a single fight deal because he could just come in and beat him and just that's it, gone, right? So I want at least 2-3 fight deals so I can bring him back and for the rematch or like in different title, whatever that is. And that becomes very difficult right now because most of the fighters in America and Europe who have a chance to get into UFC will never sign that kind of deal because they want to go for the Contender Series on summer, right?
But they could work it out. That'd be beneficial for Shuto too, because if they're VTJ is trying to build themselves as like the upper brand of Shuto, they can bring in foreign talent, so that'd be good for them.
So I think they should sign like good foreign talent for like 3 fights, 12-month deal kind of stuff. Because 1 year a fighter can wait. If you're 21, you can wait 22, right? I mean, whatever. If you can get a good, and especially a country like Brazil, Like, you don't get that many opportunities. You know what I mean? Like there's so many out there, but so many are fighting for like free or like $500.
Yeah.
So for them, it's better to fight for VTJ, right?
Well,
So
any of these Brazilian fighters or any of these like Eastern European or like Russian fighters just seem to be all over the place.
right. Or you'd be surprised, like South American fighters, because there's a Combate America who does the show every week, but their pay is very low. You know what I mean? So
do they concentrate mainly on Mexican fighters?
Or South American fighters who
Mhm.
has the visa to come to the States. So they're not paying
Okay.
for the visa and stuff like that. So it's not that easy. And for even South American fighters, it's not like easy to get a visa and stuff, right? Because it's not that cheap.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you'd be surprised. There are talents out there. You just have to look for it,
Oh, I mean, look at Musayev. The guy came out of nowhere. They just found him in Azerbaijan and brought him over, essentially.
That's true, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, in a way, that's why, I mean, Erie too, like Rising has been doing a pretty good job discovering those, I would say, unknown talent. But I think that's what the promoters have to do in these days because UFC takes everybody.
I mean, look at Rising's their biggest foreign successes. I mean, Manel Cape, Ivory Coast. You
Right.
have Edie, Poland, and I mean Czechoslovakia, and the Czech Republic, and then you have Musayev. Those are the probably three most popular foreign fighters they brought in, and
Right.
all from somewhat obscure locations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always been like that though, because back in Sengoku too, right? They had some fighters who really don't like Dan Hornbuckle, like Rodrigo Dam, like who know that, right? But so something like that they need to do, I think.
Didn't that old Brazilian they brought over as a heavyweight just to win the PFL championship?
Yeah.
He won the heavyweight tournament in PFL. That
Right.
guy that Edie knocked out won $1 million.
Right. I mean, I maybe Shidario Tsuyoshi should even consider that next year, right?
I've been laughing all week, by the way, thinking of you just trying to find a 145-pound woman.
Or 155-pound women. I mean,
155.
yeah. I mean,
do you have 2 years junior high school wrestling experience that can make you a world champion?
Yeah. I mean, really, I really think every judo or wrestler, female wrestler, judoka in Japan should consider that, especially if you're like a top 10 in nation. I mean, really, I might give Kyle Harrison a run. Who knows, right? Yeah. All right, so let's get to my favorite subject always. All right, Rin Nakai update. So what did she do this week?
Well, it's not what she did, it's what her husband did.
Okay.
So the news is that first off, side note, on her Twitter, she posted a picture of him on the computer.
Yeah.
And it absolutely cracked me up because I just assumed that he was on Twitter. But
yeah, exactly. I saw that too. Right. Yeah. No, it's
apparently,
not. What happened? This T1 ticket guy, he's like a president of a ticket agency in Japan. He's known for criticizing all these fighters and people.
Not his first appearance on our show.
Mm-hmm.
He has, because he was on previously, I believe, for criticizing crowdfunding.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it's important the reason he is important in this story is because he doesn't really give a shit. I think that's probably the most important part about him is that he's a ticket seller. So he kind of knows what's going on behind the scenes, and he's been involved kind of in the MMA world for a very long time.
Right.
And I think he likes to get drunk and say things on Twitter and stuff. But essentially, he's claiming that Usami would find people that were saying negative things about Nakai Rin, direct message them, and be like, "You're preventing Rin from getting into your messages are preventing Rin from getting into the UFC. You need to stop posting tweets like this because we're trying to get into the UFC." And it's kind of funny because one of the things was I believe somebody posted a video of Rin fighting Murata.
Yeah.
And he was like mad. He's like, "Take that video down."
Why?
People kind of making fun of him. They're like, "Ren won that fight. Why does he want him to take that fight down?" Like, doesn't make any sense.
I wonder. I would love to invite him to our show as a guest and interview that guy. What the hell is he thinking?
Well, I do want to say this is all alleged, but I'll say one piece of evidence that I think kind of supports this guy's statement is that recently Rin Nakai has been like tweeting thanks to anyone that says anything positive about her. she'll be like, "Thank you for report" and all this stuff, which lets me know that Usami is looking for what people are saying about Rin.
Okay.
And then so he finds people saying good things and he thanks them. So it's not that far of a reach to say that he finds people saying bad things and he's telling them to delete the tweet and take the message down.
Right, but this T1 ticket guy has pointed out that Usami did attack some of the guys, but he really doesn't go for big guns. Like, for example, he himself said that he criticized Dean so many times that he never received a direct message.
Well, I think he's also saying that because I think he's accusing Usami of kind of like being a coward. He's saying that Usami likes to pick on people that he knows won't fight back. But when he doesn't message anyone, that if he told them to delete the tweet, they would just make fun of him or tell him no.
Right. Because I have criticized what they do, and he never bothered me.
I think she follows you.
She does follow me, right? I know. So I'm pretty sure he reads everything what I tweet, right?
And then I also heard that he's back to his blog posting.
Oh, he did.
He's back to the blogs posting, not blogs, the message boards. He's back on the message boards, slandering Kana Watanabe. But this time he's
anonymously. I mean, yeah,
anonymous, and he's also added Sayaki to his crosshairs.
Really?
So no longer just Kana Watanabe. Well, I think he's upset that Sayaki said that they've been offering her fights.
They did. I know they did.
Because he's been playing this whole like, oh, the world's out to get us. No one's offering us a fight. And then Sayaki's like, we've offered you hundreds of fights. I don't know what you're talking about. And now he's all of a sudden, I think he's mad about that. So now he's talking shit about Sayaki on these message boards. Which seems like a Sayaki, to those that aren't super aware, is the head of Deep, but he's much more than the head of Deep. And I think he has the ear of every influential MMA promoter in Japan.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why you would start attacking the guy that could just end your career.
Right. And on top of that, obviously Sayaki sits on a matchmaking meeting with Rizin, right? I mean, obviously, right. So I mean, if you want to go for the biggest show in Japan, why not be in a good term with him, right?
Well, because he was also, wasn't he the former PR guy for Pride?
For Pride too, yes.
So he knows Sakakibara.
Right. He knows everybody. Yeah, Sakakibara, Sahara, Sayaki, they're all buddies. They're all from Nagoya, Aichi Prefecture. Yeah. They go way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, Sayaki's also generally considered, I think, to be one of the nicer promoters in Japan.
I think so too. Right.
Like really easygoing, and kind of funny at events. He'll like wear a suit for the video and then pop into sweatpants and a shirt and just start walking around. But I mean, I don't know why they'd go after him, especially when she's taking fights at Heat. I mean, you got to think that Deep or Pancrase is a better choice than Heat, but
way better. But he burned the bridge with Pancrase, so the Pancrase won't happen. But she fought for Deep Jewel, so why not just keep fighting for them, right? It's just real stupidity at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone that's going to go into the UFC unless you're super famous for something else without fighting in 2 years.
But in terms of like a good opponent, I don't think she ever fought anybody in the last 5 years, or maybe Kanako Murata, who is like weight class below.
Right. That was one of Kanako. That was very early in Murata's career.
Right. So
and Rin was way bigger than her.
Again, you remember back then she pumped her weight hoping that she wants to fight Cyborg. Maybe she should go for PFL Harrison then. I know Harrison is way bigger and probably get beat, but still, right? I mean,
that would be funny, but I've always thought she should just go down to strawweight.
No. I always thought her weight class should be the 115. Yeah. It's stupid that she pumped it up. She's short to begin with,
Also, this obsession with Kana Watanabe is like almost scary to this point. It's why are you so obsessed with someone who isn't even an option to fight anymore?
No, and who lost the fight in Bellator anyway, so who cares, right?
I mean, you both did judo. I get it. But besides that, the similarities end. She's moved on. You should move on as well.
I think from Usami's point of view that she was supposed to fight Rin and just didn't wait for her to when they were ready to fight her.
My idea is that he sees her in Bellator is what Rin should be doing.
That too, of
That he
course.
thinks
Right.
that Watanabe took Ren's spot, as if there's a limited number of spots.
Well, too bad though that she's the one who said no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's not much. Yeah. No. I know all about it. That it's just too bad that it's.
Well,
I'm
it's just
telling you, it's almost domestic violence going on there, like
it's
psychologically.
it's so stupid because it's the answer is easy. Go fight Shizuka Sugiyama and go fight Kate Lotus, and next thing you know, you might start getting phone calls from big promotions.
Right. Or like obviously Deep Jew is probably planning on doing flyweight tournament right next
Right.
year. Go
Mhm.
fight in that and win that whole thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I love how she talks about how she's like the Valkyrie champ. Like Valkyrie hasn't existed as a promotion for 10
Jesus,
years. What are you talking
Valkyrie.
about?
Oh my God. I mean, I
Hasn't
remember there was the
existed so long.
decades Valkyrie, Smack Girls. I think it was a G Shuto. It was like
Yeah, a
three
lot.
all women's promotions, right? In
It's
Japan.
like that'd be like me putting my gig as a pizza delivery driver on my resume still. It's like, yeah, once you're past 10 years, maybe you should start taking some of this stuff off. It's like when the promotions don't exist anymore.
That's too bad. I mean, but again, I'll predict right now. I think everybody will agree with me. Nothing's gonna change in Nakai's world, and
No,
I don't think she'll ever get to UFC. You know,
no.
no. I mean, it's
Especially since they've dealt with her before.
right. I mean, they already know what is it like to deal with Mr. Usami. So
That's what kind of cracks me up about the tweets is the tweets are tweeted from an angle that almost seem to suggest she's never fought for the UFC before.
hmm
It's like, give me a chance to fight in the UFC. And the response is, you've had a chance to fight in the UFC.
right,
You took a shorter contract. You made them give you a shorter contract.
right. Shorter contract, and they complain about the decisions. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They you did have a chance and it failed.
It failed, and not just a fail. It just kind of burned bridge too. It's
Yeah.
just not the right way to deal with him. Anybody actually, in that sense.
I will say though, with speaking of burned bridges, that the Pancrase bridge is probably closed. I don't
hmm
think Deep cares what he says on message boards. I think she could easily fight with Deep or Deep Jules. I think she could fight for Ryzen. I think she could fight for all these promotions if she would just agree to it. But someone
Yeah,
needs to convince her that the UFC is not going to call to put her in a last minute fight
right.
because
She doesn't even happen for her, right? She's
they
too
don't
old
pick
too.
last minute opponents from across the world. They're not going to like
No, unless
fly
if
you
it's
in.
a Japan show or some
Yeah,
show in Macau where nobody else can get a work visa except Japanese kind of stuff, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But here's my prediction. I'm hoping that pandemic will ease out on pandemic restriction next year. So maybe UFC will start doing more shows in Asia or even Australia, New Zealand, which would be considered as Asian territory. So that will open more door
Wait,
to the Japanese fighters.
I just thought something funny. What if she went to one championship and fought in their strawweight division? Not Angela Lee. They have that one like their strawweight, their 125-pound division. I think
Yeah.
the champion is the Chinese girl, the Panda, Kung Fu Panda.
Right, but here's
And
bottom line though. But they all want to go to UFC, and
I
they
know,
always ask for shorter contracts. So there's no way they'll sign that 6-fight deal with the one
but
championship.
look, one championship doesn't drug test. We could get the biggest Ren Nakai of all time just smashing people.
And that may be kind of interesting. That.
Uh,
I know it's too bad, but
yeah,
she should just fight for Rising. That should be her
yeah,
obvious choice. Period. And
yeah.
yeah,
She should be fighting it up. Not fighting is worse than she should be doing anything. She should be fighting in any regard. She should be
I
doing, if not MMA, why aren't you doing grappling? What's so weird is the Heat thing, as obscure as it was, did bring her a lot of attention. And I'm like, why aren't you building on this? Why aren't you doing anything at all to
nothing.
make money?
I don't think they know, and the bottom line is like it's only created as like attentions in their small world. It's just not getting anywhere.
Right. But especially now that you said that the sponsorship money is getting good and rising, I'm like,
Well,
why won't you go
exactly.
there,
Right.
fight
I
on
don't know if
Fuji
he doesn't
TV and
go there.
make more money than you've ever made before?
Right. I mean, I will never reveal this, but you'd be surprised some of the sponsor money Pancha and Lina made. Really,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, look at I mean, Nakai Rain could get that Don Quixote sponsorship she's been dreaming of her entire life.
Probably, and she probably can get enough sponsorship that will finance her to train in the States or whatever that is, or bringing her and her husband together, right? That kind of stuff. So.
It's funny you bring that up because she always got mad that Rising paid for Kana Asakura and Murata to train in the U.S. And my response to that was, you fought for Rising one time? You fought for Rising one time. Maybe if they saw you as an investment that would like return on the investment, they would pay for this. But if you're going to fight one time, they're not going to pay for it.
This officially. First of all, Kana Asakura's trip was paid because she was sponsored by Sky Ticket. Okay. Sky Ticket sponsored her because she fought for Rising more than one time, and she was a popular fighter. Now, 2, they paid for Murata's trip to States, whatever that is. That's because Murata is on actually a full-time employment contract with Rising. So she's making a monthly salary, but instead the Rising takes big chunk of her purse or sponsorship and that kind of stuff. Therefore, they are paying for her training expenses and stuff like that. So the deal is totally different. And this is Min Nakai and Usami, who never sign any long-term deals, right? So how you expect them to get that kind of treatment from promotions, really?
Maybe one day we can get you to sit down and talk about King Reina's trip with Sky Perfect.
Well, because right now King Reina was also sponsored by Sky Ticket.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly, right. And
but
I told you about this, right? She was supposed to have a credit card with her because to check into the hotel, you need a credit card in the States, right? So they told her, you gotta get a credit card, She did not get a credit card. So the Sky Ticket president gave her I think a Black American Express just in case, right?
Like the most powerful credit card in the world.
That card, right? So
the most powerful credit card with no limit.
So again,
I assume was a 19-year-old girl going to the U.S. for the first time.
Right. So it's a sponsored fighters, right? So it's totally different. They shouldn't be complaining about that at all,
Yeah.
All right, so let's ask you. Well, let's see. Here we go. Any plan of go over Tenshin Takeru today? No, they're probably not going to happen, right? No.
Well, especially now that Murata and Triple G is on. New Year's Eve's running out of space.
Right, and also that Rise already announced that the Tenshin's last fight's in April or something like that, right? Next year.
I think he suggested that he wants to fight Ratatong.
Ratatong, yes. Yeah. But that's not going to happen because he's under the one contract.
Right.
And Tenshin will probably fight in New Year's Eve, some exhibition fights or whatever, an easy kickboxing fight for the last Rising fight, right? So, it's too bad, but it's probably not going to happen, which I still hope it will, though, because it's going to be a huge fight,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Is Murata still tied with an employee contract? Yes, she still have 1 year left. I mean, a few months left. So we'll see, right? Let's see. Does Sakakibara have the December 29th date? Yeah, he does. Yes. That's what he's giving that date to the boxing fight, right?
Right. So it's going to be. I thought it's kind of interesting. In the U.S., is it on DAZN?
I think so.
In Japan, it's on Amazon Prime.
Right. And Fuji Television is involved, and not Rising sort of involved. So it's it's pretty interesting combinations, right?
Right. And Murata was an Olympic medalist, right? Was he an Olympic boxer?
I think so. Right. Yeah.
It's gonna be huge. Boxing is absolutely massive in Japan, and they love it. And Triple G is just a superstar, so it's gonna be a huge fight.
So it's a huge fight, and it's gonna attract some of the viewership from the States too. Right?
But to the question, I think Sakakibara's had that date for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is what happens with Saitama Super Arena. For those people who doesn't know, if you have the dates for this year, you have a priority right for the next year. So the reason why Deep did the Saitama Super Arena show once, remember, between Dream and
was to keep the date, right?
Keep the date, right, for Sakakibara. Yeah. So again, that's how close Deep is with Sakakibara, right? Yeah. Deep went, did the show just to keep the dates for Sakakibara. So unless they give up on that date, they will always have that date,
And I have so how do you think the deal works out? Do you think that Rising just gets a cut, or they get like a flat rate?
Sure. I mean, if he has the rights to that venue, I'm pretty sure they're going to have to get paid to give up that date, right? Of course.
So they're going to give him like a percentage of the ticket sales or something?
Maybe. Yeah, some kind of deal. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure they're not going to give up that date for free, right?
Plus, I mean, restrictions all signs point restrictions being lifted for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, it
And
is.
so that event is going to sell out and it's going to make a ton of money.
Mm-hmm. You know what's so funny? Like it's all the restriction lifted, but still the Rising still going to operate under the so-called pandemic operation rules. So they don't give out managers credentials. They're cutting down the cornerman's number from 3 to 2, that type of stuff. I don't think that's going to change even on New Year's Eve. So
Well, I mean, it's people talk. I've been talking to my friends a lot about how I think a lot of companies did things for the pandemic, and they're going to keep doing them because it saved them money.
right, yeah,
And I just hope that rising ticket prices go back to what they were, because I think they've gotten used to the fact that the cheapest tickets are $100 now, and they used to be $50.
right.
And I would like them to be a little more affordable. If that makes sense.
I mean, exactly. I mean, and plus with the landmark and trigger shows, and all the Rising fans now have to spend more money on the pay-per-views, right? So
Yeah, I saw that Drake interviewed them, and they said they're doing like what 12 to 17 events next year.
they're gonna try, right? I heard, yeah.
Ooh, I do have one thing I forgot I wanted to bring up. Did you see that Bobby Oligan was in the news for saving
I
someone
know
from
he's
drowning?
saving some girl from the river or something like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
well, good
First
thing
off,
you get a good
that
press.
seems fake. That seems fake as hell.
It is
How
fake.
the hell during fight week does he all of a sudden save someone from drowning? Like, did he throw somebody in a river and pull them out? Like, this just reminds me of when John Jones stopped that robbery during fight week or something.
Yeah. Well, I say somebody's. Yeah, I know. You think that was fake?
No, I don't think it's. I'm not gonna say it's fake. I just think it's very convenient
It is
that
convenient, right?
that Bobby, who Sakakibara also seemed upset with Bobby because Bobby apparently was filming his own TV show
Hmm.
at the press conference, which to me makes me think that Sakakibara probably thinks that that comedian in the crowd was planted there by Bobby to
Right.
create
Probably,
interest in the
right.
event by
I
Bobby.
think so too, right? But I'm
And
surprised
now all of a sudden he
didn't
saves
know,
someone
though.
from drowning.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
it seems very convenient.
so yeah, that sounds very convenient, and then they made the headlines too, right? Or the regular news, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
The last sentence of the Yahoo News was, though, he did beat his wife last year or something. Like, they still put those DV stuff in the news. So
Yeah, I mean, but DV is pretty bad in the States.
really bad.
Yeah, I mean,
But I'm just, it seems incredibly convenient that he somehow saved someone from drowning, literally 1 week before he's supposed to fight in Okinawa.
right. Well, speaking of Okinawa show, I just want to let the listeners know that Okinawa show is it's basically sold out, right?
Yeah.
Because I heard from everybody it's very hard to get the tickets. And Mr. Tsunabe, who is who lives in Okinawa, who's going to fight in this show, he usually sells tons of tickets. And he gets so much orders, he asks for tickets. He's just Rising basically said, no, we don't have any more.
Well, I mean, my one criticism of this card is it has a lot of not top level talent on it.
Yeah.
But I think Rising went the other way, and they got a bunch of popular Okinawan fighters on the card.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put Rena and Miyu, who are both insanely popular, on the card.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I always thought this card was going to sell well just because of who they put on it.
Right. I mean, and of course, I mean, you have to understand they have to sell tickets. So they do book fighters who has a ticket selling power, and also some local guys from Okinawa or who's from Okinawa. That makes sense, right?
The biggest example of that to me is Nisei.
Mm-hmm.
Nisei has a negative record. I think she's like 4-5,
Mm-hmm.
but she's popular in Okinawa. She's got an aggressive style, and she's what they're looking to put on there. So she's going to sell tickets.
Right. So I think that's what it is. I think there's nothing wrong about having a top couple of fights and maybe ticket seller fights and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, because in many ways, this is like a local destination card.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're selling, like the Rising's doing their typical selling vacation packages, like
I heard
hotel,
the
plane, and
vacation package is selling pretty well too, and it's like almost $2,000, right? Like $1,800, right? And you get to have a dinner with them and like T-shirts, whatever that is. But I think, and partly, I think a lot of people forget about this. But remember, King of the Cage did the show once in Okinawa and did very well.
I think Okinawa is a genius location because there's that market of the base.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many fighters, so many people from the base are probably fight fans.
Right, fight fans. And it's like a lack of entertainment out there, too. So it's not like they have a big concerts or like festival every weekend. So this is
And
going
I
to be a
believe
big show, you know?
the bottom of your poster, I think Tanner actually is a soldier on the base.
Right. So
That's I mean, getting a guy on the base to fight in the card, that's going to sell a ton of tickets just from people that want to see him fight.
right, and of course, in the back then, like 5 years ago, UFC used to do a show in a military base and stuff. Remember, they had that, yeah. So it makes sense. It matches, and on top of that, Sakakibara used to manage a soccer team in Okinawa, Ryukyu FC too. So that means he probably has more connection with the business community over there too, right? So
Right.
So it only makes sense, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, Yamamoto Miyu, Crazy B has a gym location in Okinawa.
Right.
And so Yamamoto family has a connection down there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that they put this card together was how can we sell tickets in Okinawa? And they did that.
Right. Oh, obviously, and also to get a little bit of attention for the general public, which is like a Bobby Olagon and like those pro wrestlers.
Koji.
Yeah, and the Koji. I mean, I saw Koji on some Japanese TV drama last week.
Did you see the pro wrestling he did where he beat the guy by a headbutt?
Oh no, I didn't see that, but I heard about it. Yeah.
My wife is not a Koji fan, and she was like, "That was not funny."
Yeah.
And I was like, it was kind of funny. I thought it was hilarious, actually."
Yeah, no, that's clever. So he's like he's almost like an Aoki route. Then he's taking. He's doing pro wrestling, all kinds of stuff.
Plus, I mean, he was showing up. Where was he? He might have been at the last Rising event. I mean, in the Rising Confession, he was there because he was cornering somebody. So Koji's around, and he's not like Shoji, but he's popping up around, and I think he's pretty popular. He's got his fans.
I know. And like I said, you know, he was on this TV drama I watch every week. It's about the guy, the former Yakuza who was in jail for a long time, and he came out and tried to make his life, you know, back to normal. And Koji is one of the guys in this television. He had the dialogues and everything else. So,
and I think we talked about like his name recognition is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Miyu Yamamoto's name recognition is absolutely massive. She was doing commentary at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And then you have Rena, who is insanely popular as well. I was laughing because she was on some TV show last week, which I think was boat gambling, like boat race gambling. They just had like this green screen with these boats racing, and she and like two comedians were just talking about it. And I'm like, Japan has the best television. Rena is on the weirdest possible show right now.
So in a way, for like Koji, I heard he could sell like up to like 5,000 tickets by himself, kind of stuff, right? So
absolutely.
You got Reina, Miyu, and Koji, and that's like already a ticket sold, I think, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they put Bobby Olagon, who's known in the general public, and also a bunch of a ticket seller from Okinawa. So, and
Bobby Olagon's the genius move because Bobby Olagon is probably cheap, and it gets you nationwide media attention
for sure.
Because people are like, "Oh, that guy that was arrested last year is on your card."
Right. And he was on lots of TV variety shows, so people at least recognize his name. So there will be at least, he fought kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But although I still think Black Panther Beno will beat him, you know?
Oh, he's not fighting him. He's fighting.
Oh no, the Kitamura guy. Yeah, the other black guy is fighting the Beno.
Yeah, he's fighting Daryl Lakoku, who was also arrested last year. The charges were dropped or something.
What did he do?
They found his wallet outside of a car that it got broken into. So,
well, that's too bad.
But the Daryl and Beidou fight should be kind of fun because they're both strikers. So
yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. You know.
Yeah.
And Beidou, I think he's going to be pretty good. You know.
And as you know, I'm happy that Judy Ohara is finally back in Rizin.
Finally, he's getting that shot. Oh, by the way, I'm so surprised that Ushiku is defending a title in Deep in December.
It tells me that watching the Rising Confession video, Sakakibara it's very clear they wanted Saito to win.
Right.
They're like, we put him on the poster. We are champion, and he loses. It's chaos now. And the conversation isn't Ushiku's the new champion.
Right.
The conversation is the division's chaos. We have to do a Grand Prix now to figure it out. So I don't think Rising is in the Ushiku business.
Yeah, I don't think so. But they have to bring him in because he is a title holder, right?
Right. Which I believe is because Saito insisted it be a title fight.
Right.
I think if Rising had done it, it would have been a non-title
fight. So it would have been a big deal, right?
So I think Ushiku has to go back to Deep to fight with them. And I think even Saudi Oshima kind of hinted that she's going back to Deep to defend her championships and things like that.
Surprised. Right, yeah.
So plus, I mean, Rising has so many fighters now; it's hard to keep them busy. But I will say it is kind of a bad look when you're champion. It's like, I'm going back down to the regional level. I'll see you guys later.
Right. And I'm telling you right now, besides in the featherweight, right, there's a one fighter who actually have a win over both Saito and Ushiku, and also
I know where you're going.
Nakajima, who has beaten Horie. So there are a lot of guys like that, right? So there are still fighters they can try to pick up, but not necessarily that exciting,
Yeah. Well, I mean, Daisuke Nakamura is going to be the champion in 2022. Calling it now.
Right. Yeah, that's possible too. So you think New Year's Eve? Obviously, Ushiku won't be fighting, so it has to be a Mikuru versus Saito or Mikuru versus Kleber rematch, right?
Ooh, that's a good question because I kind of don't expect to see Saito. I think he's going to sit out and let his cut heal.
I think so too, right?
Because I mean, I read something where they said if that cut had been a couple centimeters lower, like his eye might have fallen out or something like super graphic. And they said it was incredibly deep. So if I was him, I would take the time to make sure that cut like fully heals because I wouldn't want it opening back up in another fight.
Right.
So I would expect to see him not fight until next year.
Means you think it's going to be Mikuru versus Kleber Koike rematch?
I would say that's possible because at the end of the Rising Confession video, Sakakibara said, I think it's time to forgive Kleber Koike.
Right. But do you think Mikuru would take that rematch? Because he could lose that again. Easily, to tell the truth.
No, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, if I was Mikuru's manager, I wouldn't take that fight, but I don't think Mikuru listens to his manager. So
yeah, exactly. Right. It depends on the condition too, I bet,
Yeah, and it would if he went and lost, that'd be bad for Naoki because I don't think that they've ever fought on one event where both of them have lost. I think it's always one wins, one loses.
Right.
Every time they fight on the same card. But I think it's too. I would save that fight for the Grand Prix. I don't know if I would do that now.
Right. Then who else is available at the featherweight for Mikuru, right? Because the another guy who is winning right now is Horie. And I don't know who's going to fight in Trigger Show, but if he wins again, that's be 3 wins in a row. But he trains with them, right? So
the New Year's Eve card, every fighter is saying they want to fight on it, and you have to like step back and be like, "This is the tournament. There's a tournament taking place on this event.
Right.
There's limited space for the New Year's Eve card." So I think
Mikuru believes Kleber is the only guy better than other featherweight division in Rising. Do you agree?
Do they mean that Mikuru believes that Kleber is the only guy better than himself, or that Kleber's the best? That like Mikuru is the best, second is Kleber, then everyone else is beneath?
Yeah, well, I mean, I still think Horie and Majima will be a very tough matchup for Mikuru, especially Majima. I'm not sure if the Mikuru can beat him, especially if he hits the ground.
And to the guy's comment, I guess, I mean, I think it's Kleber's obviously probably the best fighter in the division.
Probably, yeah.
At this point in time, at least established.
Yeah. Rising is
not forever.
Announced. Yeah, well, I'm so sorry.
Welcome to the world of Japanese MMA. I've seen fights announced like 3 days before.
He had the fight confirmed. It's my client, but he got injured after he took the fight, and yeah, so I'm so sorry to Rising and all the fans. I'm sorry, So
was the slowest probably Tenshin Nasukawa fighting the the guy from Hawaii on 1 day's notice or something?
Yeah, something like that. But right now, I think it's going to be hard to find the opponent for Horie. Hopefully, they'll find somebody. Yeah.
Horie is a stud too. I'm looking forward to see how he develops.
Yeah, and actually, I still personally think he's good. He will be good at 135 too, which will stir things up over there. But
I mean, but to the original thing about Mikuru. If I was Rising, you'd almost want to put him against another guy like Hagiwara and get him a win over a popular guy.
Me too.
I would him get smashed again.
Yeah, exactly. I would have done the same thing. Why not? It's like New Year's Eve is like a festival.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll just make it.
Give the people what they want.
Right, exactly. And for Kleber's point of view too, so I'm not sure he wants to fight him again immediately, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they've run out of people for Miku to beat up. Are they going to call Liam Takeshi and be like, we need one more time? Come on out here and fight Mikuru.
Yeah, well, but again, now we were talking about Mikuru here. That's obviously the rising need Mikuru, right, to fight in that short.
Well, they have Kai, and I think it's pretty clear that Panchan Rena is going to be on the card.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Panchan Rena doesn't have nearly the draw of these people yet.
No.
So,
yeah.
Who are the people that they're going to want on a card? They're going to want the Asakura brothers.
Tenshin.
They're going to want Rena. They're going to want Tenshin.
Yeah.
And I mean, if not Rena, they're going to want the winner of Rena or Miyu, I think, has a high chance of being on the card.
Yep.
Because they're both huge names. And Ayaka Hamasaki isn't that big of a draw, but since he's a champion, I can see them wanting her on the card.
Sure, but they need to find some good opponent. That's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Kana Asakura is coming off of a tough loss.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they want to give her a quick turnaround or if they want to give her time to recover. So they're kind of in an interesting situation with a lot of their popular fighters.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, did you see in an interview recently, Rena kind of stepped back on her comments about retiring?
Right. I think she took it back because she backpedaled, basically. You know?
Which, if you followed Rena, this will probably be like her 7th retirement announcement throughout her career. I mean, she said she wanted to retire back in 2010.
Right.
So I think what happens is she really likes fighting. And once the end starts getting closer, she's doing the Emi Fujino thing where it's like, well, another year. Because I think Emi Fujino said she's going to retire at 30 or something.
Right. I mean, I think honestly, I think, you're a competitor, you enjoy that sport and you don't want to leave it. I totally get it. But at the same time, as a professional, if you stop being a professional fighter, then you're not a fighter anymore. And then what you're going to do, because it's not like you're a huge TV talent, right?
Well, also,
your value of TV talent always lies on being a fighter too. So
right, exactly. But it's not like the market has changed so much. I mean, you'd be a fool to retire now if you had the ability to fight, because when she said she wanted to retire 10 years ago, it's like, well, the MMA market and kickboxing market is dead in Japan. There's no money to be made.
For female, it was nothing, right?
Yeah, but now it's like, you're 30 years old. You can still fight for a while and make more money in the next years than you have in your entire career combined.
Exactly, right. And I think she realized that the money is there,
Right. Plus, now she's working out with some of the younger fighters at AACC, and I think it's kind of reinvigorated her interest.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm excited because this Rena and Miyu fight is probably one of the more interesting rematches, because they were both so young when they fought the first time, like career-wise.
Yeah. And Miyu was a novice MMA fighter back then.
Yeah, so it's going to be completely different.
Yeah, I think it's going to be different too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, he said I was referring to how Mikuru said Kleber dake amatama hitotsu dake. So Kleber is one notch above everybody else in the featherweight. Yeah, that's, I guess, true.
I wouldn't say. I mean, that's not a crazy thing to say. I mean, he's got like 55. How many fights does he have? He has a ton of fights.
Tons of fights, right?
He was a legitimate guy over in Poland, KSW.
Right, and in Japan, he nobody has really beat him, so
Yeah.
So you can say that, and especially in today's rising featherweight. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious he's the best right now.
I was actually upset. I thought if I was him and Saito could have been fairly interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be interesting. So is actually him against Poirier too, because it'll be a different fight style, right? So yeah, so those guys up there, I think, it's pretty much. Mm-hmm. So it's not. I think again, Mikuru trains with Poirier, so they probably won't fight, but right. So it's I think those guys are pretty up there, Majima and everybody else. I personally think those guys are maybe even better than Ushiku.
Well, it's one of those things where also I think they're just going to keep getting better.
Mm-hmm.
They're still pretty young in their careers, and I think they're just going to keep getting better.
Right. So, yeah.
Exactly. I think Koike, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of rapid improvements from him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's, because of just how long he's been fighting.
Right.
I think it'll be more gradual improvements, where some of the younger guys, you might see bigger leaps.
Sure.
In their improvements. So people might catch up to him.
Well, I think that obviously it's really hard to beat Kleber on the ground or submission game, right? So that's why I think Poirier has a chance. I think Poirier is a striker. I think it seems like the way to beat Kleber is knock him out, right? Or hurt him with the striking. So
I'm so distracted. Are you wearing a Lazy God shirt right now?
Yes, I am. I'm advertising for Mr. Uruka Sasaki, my client.
I saw the little horn, like the thorns
Yes,
popping
this
up, and
is
I'm like, that's got to
lazy.
be a Lazy God shirt.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This is the kind of a T-shirt you want to give to a girl who you had a one-night stand with.
like a little, what's it, the famous Derek Jeter, the Derek Jeter gift bag with an iPad in it.
Right, exactly. Right. All right, so that's it for today.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. And are you working today, Charlie?
I am, yes, but I work remotely.
Okay. All right. So out of home. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's it for today. And have a good day. And I guess we see you in 2 weeks.
Yep. Let me know how the princess is doing now that you know where she lives.
Yes, I will. Okay. All right. See you later.